can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 148. He's Josh Carney. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this, we'll call it Wednesday, Thursday. Not 100% sure what time this episode will air, but midweek here on the Terrible Podcast. Dave Bryant is on vacation, as we mentioned on Monday's show, and so the schedule this week a little bit more up in the air. But filling in with for Dave today with me, excited to have Josh Carney here, longtime member of Steelers Depot, part of that morning crew. When you guys wake up, usually you're reading what Josh has to say. So, Josh, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on again. I hope Dave's having a great vacation. Much deserved for him. So excited to talk Steelers football here with you today.
Yeah, me as well. Unfortunately, what we're going to lead off with is a very somber piece of news, and it came in late last night, I believe after 10 o'clock p.m., reported by 93.7 The Fans, Colin Dunlap, that former Pittsburgh Steelers outside linebacker Clark Haggans had died at the age of 46. No cause of death is currently known based off that initial report. Haggans, a fifth-round pick out of Colorado State of the Steelers in 2000, part of those, really strong mid-2000s defenses, including starting on that Super Bowl XL team in 2005. That was a career season for him, having 9 sacks, spent over a decade in the NFL, majority of that with Pittsburgh, but also spent time in Arizona and a year in San Francisco. So very obviously shocking and sad news for a guy that I know you and I grew up watching.
Yeah, very surprising last night. Very sad to see that news. Only 46 years old. I mean, that really hits close to home, especially, like you mentioned, we grew up with him. Clark Haggans was a big name for the Steelers defense in those early 2000s. Super underrated player. I know that there was, some eyebrows raised when the Steelers moved on from Jason Gilden, and everyone within the Steelers said, hey, Clark Haggans is that next guy. And sure enough, 2004, 2005 were some of his best years. And he was that quintessential Steelers development guy, 5th-round pick out of Colorado State, kind of sat on the bench, was a situational pass rusher, special teams player, and developed into a very good starter and a key one on that Super Bowl XL team. But very sad news. Again, just 46 years old, very shocking news that came in late last night.
Yeah, as you said, a real key, underrated piece. It wasn't a superstar, aligned opposite of Joey Porter with the other great names there, Troy, Ike, James Ferrier, even guys like Aaron Smith along the defensive line, him and Casey Hampton. But Haggans really just played his role well. Part of that aggressive 3-4 attacking system was a really strong fit. Obviously, it's just a game. We don't want to be so focused on his career. There was a life and there's a family that's grieving today. But obviously, again, from our perspective, our football mindset, and as you said, growing up watching this guy, and so far too young, and just unfortunately been just too much death, too much tragedy in the news lately with Pittsburgh, with Stan Savran, and just recent years, Dwayne Haskins last year. So obviously not news that you want to read about, but something, of course, we had to talk about today.
Yeah, and it's something, obviously you get that sad news and your initial reaction is shock. I was very surprised when I saw that DM last night, and then obviously you wrote up the story. But then I kind of just dove back into Clark Haggans' career, and the great thing about him, he was so consistent. That 2005 season, he had 9 sacks, which was a career high. He didn't have double-digit sacks in any game, but his 9 sacks in the regular season were so consistent, evenly spread out. And then obviously, I believe it was the first drive of Super Bowl XL against the Seahawks, he sacked Matt Hasselbeck. So just a super consistent player. Funny thing is, I went back and looked at his first start for Pittsburgh in 2004 after they moved on from Gilden. He had 2 sacks in the win over Oakland at home. So that was a game where it was like, okay, the Steelers made the right decision here. They believe in the guy that they developed. And what a player he was. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, those 2004, 2005 defenses, he was not a big name outside of Pittsburgh whatsoever, but he was very good opposite Joey Porter and just did his job so well. And it's very sad that at 46 he's gone.
Yeah, that's well said, Josh. And so been a lot of tributes, and I'm sure we'll probably hear from some former teammates. Maybe Taylor on his next podcast will share some of those stories and thoughts. So as difficult as it is to make that transition from that central, important, and tragic news, we will try to do so because there is some other Steelers news to discuss here. Some signings that we knew were basically going to happen, some roster moves that were set to occur became official on Tuesday around 4 p.m., 4:30, with the Pittsburgh Steelers announcing they had officially signed linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski, I think is the pronunciation on that. Still working on that a little bit, but him and long snapper Rex Sunahara have been signed, both one-year contracts, and in a corresponding move, the roster sat at 89 prior to those signings. The team released wide receiver Anthony Miller, and we kind of knew that was coming because on Monday, Miller had tweeted out, "Thank you, Pittsburgh," and kind of knew that was the writing on the wall for him. So those moves became official on Tuesday. Kwiatkowski and Sunahara in, and Anthony Miller out. What are your thoughts on I guess all those moves, most notable being Kwiatkowski, given that he may see snaps this year if there's an injury to Holcomb or Landon Roberts?
I'll start with Anthony Miller first. A little disappointed that he didn't get a chance to compete in training camp. I know obviously they've added to the room this offseason. Allen Robinson, they brought in Hakeem Butler after a tryout. Anthony Miller has had a chance with Pittsburgh, the last 2 years, but obviously last season he got hurt in training camp. From my vantage point, when we were at camp last year, he was off to a pretty good start before he got hurt. And obviously the team retained him. They signed him to a 1-year deal early on in the offseason, I believe, like early in January after the regular season ended. And he doesn't get a chance to compete. It's a little disappointing because he's that veteran guy. I thought he could be a slot option, has special teams abilities. Just a little disappointing to see him cut loose here before training camp. But I figured the Steelers were going to sign a long snapper at some point, dating back to December of last year. They've worked out.
You've been tracking it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They've worked out 7 long snappers and hadn't made a move. So Christian Kuntz's job is definitely under fire here. And Sunahara obviously has experience with the Steelers, experience in the NFL overall. He spent some time with the Dolphins. So that's an underrated position battle to watch here in training camp, assuming Sunahara makes it to camp. I don't see why he wouldn't at this point, but that is one to definitely watch. It feels like the Steelers are not satisfied with Kuntz whatsoever. But Kwiatkowski, I know that's going to be a tough pronunciation for a lot of Yinzers. We're still trying to work through that, as you said. But yeah, I just think that's a depth guy that they certainly needed. Behind Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts, you've really only got Mark Robinson and Tanner Muse. That doesn't provide much comfort, at least for me. So Kwiatkowski, he has plenty of starting experience. I think 34 starts in the NFL. He's not going to move the needle much. I think he's a pretty solid special teams guy, but I think Jonathan Heitritter summed it up perfectly in his film room the other day. He kind of fills that Robert Spillane role, gives off some Spillane vibes, decent athlete, but not a guy that you want on the field for a significant number of snaps defensively.
Sure. Yeah, with Miller, just, he'd always look good getting off the bus. He flashed early in camp last year, but then actually began to fade before he got hurt, then had the shoulder injury, spent the year on injured reserve. I was kind of surprised they re-signed him in the offseason, but obviously as that receiver room has gotten deeper, you add in Hakeem Butler, you have Calvin Austin coming back, you trade for Allen Robinson. Those things really start to squeeze a guy like Miller out. There really was no real path for him to make it to the 53, so probably better for him to try to get cut now and catch on in another camp before things ramp up late next month. Sunahara, you're right. It's funny. They go through all these names and they just end up signing the guy that was on the roster a little bit, but it was just for a brief time in late 2021 and then a bit in the 2022 offseason. The beginning of it, he got cut after rookie minicamp, but he's a tall guy. He's 6'6". You don't see too many 6'6" long snappers. But you're right. I thought Kuntz did not have a particularly good year last year. I think some competition there would be healthy. And Omar Khan's kind of theme this whole offseason has been building competition essentially everywhere. So it took a lot of doing, but it makes sense for them to bring in Sunahara. And then, with Kwiatkowski, not surprised. We knew they were going to sign one of those inside linebackers they brought in for a tryout for minicamp, either him or Jermaine Carter Jr. Kwiatkowski has probably a bit more of an NFL resume. Special teams guy last year in Atlanta. I assume he's going to be basically the top backup at essentially either inside linebacker spot. I still think Mark Robinson should be given more of an opportunity, with Terrell Austin's comments that he won't be ready to compete for a starting job until next year. And then this signing, that all tracks with what they're saying. But to me, I want to keep that window open for Robinson to have a chance to play. It seems like that chance is probably just lessened with the signing.
Do you think this move for Kwiatkowski is a negative mark against Robinson? Because obviously you mentioned Austin's comments about, he'll be able to compete for a job in 2024. And then you just mentioned he's probably going to be Kwiatkowski, that is the backup at both inside linebacker spots. Do you think this is a negative mark on Mark Robinson? Do you think this is the Steelers being a little bit not disappointed, but concerned maybe with what they've seen so far ahead of training camp? Or is this just insurance just in case?
I mean, it seems like, just to follow in Austin's comments, that they didn't feel like he was ready to play significant snaps. I mean, he did play a bit as a rookie, but it was granted in like very specific sub packages. I think their 4-4 front that they were employing against some run heavy teams in Baltimore, Carolina, and Cleveland. So it's not like Robinson was playing in their base or nickel defense last year. So I don't think it speaks to concern. I think it just speaks to, that they don't believe that he's quite ready yet, given that he was a 7th round pick, former running back in college, 1 year linebacker at Ole Miss, and then just 1 year last year. But I mean, again, I'm not in there for the day to day, and there's a lot of nuances and communication related things that I'm sure Robinson is still trying to learn and pick up and get his footing on. But I mean, the guy I thought had a good camp last year, played well when given the opportunity late last regular season, and reportedly had a nice OTAs and was getting a bunch of first team reps because Cole Holcomb was not working full in team. So I understand there's going to be some mistakes and trepidation, with playing a young guy like Robinson. But Austin, in that same conversation, said that Joey Porter Jr., we're going to play him and he's going to make some mistakes and we're going to learn from it. So why does that not apply to Mark Robinson as well? So I didn't love the idea because I wanted Robinson a chance to play. I think there's certainly some talent to work with there. But given the comments, given that they feel like he's not ready, it's no surprise at all to see them make a move and add a veteran to that group, which was admittedly a little thin.
It was. For sure it was. I do hope this is what you kind of pointed out in DMs after Austin's comments. I hope this is kind of poking the bear a bit with Robinson and kind of not lights a fire, because I don't think he needs that motivation, but I hope that this sparks something in him and he goes out and proves them wrong in training camp in the preseason and forces their hand to play him. That would be the best case scenario. But I'm with you. I want to see Robinson get opportunities. They felt comfortable enough putting him on the field last year. Granted, some of that was due to injuries and struggles with other guys in that linebacker room, but I thought he played well for the most part in that specific role. And I thought he earned an opportunity here. So hopefully he forces their hand and gets on the field here.
What second year guy, and don't say Kenny Pickett, we'll throw Kenny Pickett out of it, but what second year guy are you most interested in watching? Not even necessarily the one that'll have the most impact on the team, but the guy that you really want to see how he looks after that rookie season.
Outside of Robinson, I'm leaning Connor Hayward right now.
Okay.
I was really pleased with the way that he closed the season, obviously making plays there down the stretch as a receiver. It's pretty clear the Steelers are going to lean into that bully ball mentality. They're going to run the ball a lot, but I want to see Hayward have more of an opportunity as a receiving option. I know that the tight end room is very deep, but I want to see Pittsburgh get a little creative with him, move him around, give him some opportunities. I'm not asking for 50 targets. I'd like to see him get around 20 catches this year, but I just was really pleased with him as a football player. In general last year, especially down the stretch as a receiver, on special teams, even on that jet sweep, to close out the game. I believe it was against the Raiders. He closed out the game on that jet sweep. So just really, really interested to see how he takes that second year leap, what exactly his role is Pittsburgh offensively. But yeah, he's just, I said it a lot last year. He's just a football player. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in year two.
If you try to define his role in year two, how do you think he'll be used primarily, maybe the top 2 or 3 ways that Pittsburgh will align and assign him? Because while I agree with you, I think he came on strong the back end of his rookie season. As you said, just kind of makes plays in the passing game. Does he fit that perfect bully ball mentality because he is undersized? He's not a tremendously good, lead or, inline blocker. He's more of a Y-off cut block type of dude.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they're going to use him? Will it be more fullback? Will it be very similar to last year? Will they stand them up and flex him out more? What are you thinking?
I think it'll be very similar to how they used him last year, though I do hope that they kind of flex him out, move him around a little bit more. I don't think he can handle that true inline fullback role. That's kind of where Monty Pottebaum will come in. But
do you think Pottebaum will make the team?
Right now, I do. But again, I can be talked into, he doesn't make the team because it is the fullback, But yeah, I just want to see Hayward moved around and have that skill set utilized. I do think he could be a bit of a mismatch for linebackers, if he's flexed out. But I don't want to see him in that true fullback role because I think that's really just limiting him and asking him to do something he's not all that great at. That's going to be what I'm going to watch closely the most in training camp is just how they're deploying him. Because I think that'll give us a good idea of, how they view him, how much they trust him in certain roles. And I really want to see him, flexed out. I think against the Ravens at home late in the year, he had some success when he was standing up and kind of moved around. Obviously the Raiders game and even in the Browns game, he had that big catch. So just want to see him used as a receiver and moved around and kind of search for some of those mismatches when he's on the field.
Yeah, I think mismatches is a good way to frame that. You're trying to maybe, stress the defense by whatever their weakness is. And some of that could be some of the backfield stuff, some of the play action, boots in the flat. He can make a couple catches there. As you said, flexing out. I think he can run a pretty full route tree. So I think it'll be a similar usage to last year, probably a bit more backfield, H-back type of work, but I think similar to last year. We'll honor Dave by going down a rabbit hole quickly on Pottebaum. So you think he's going to make it? What do you think the roster construction looks like? Do you think Gentry makes it too? Do you think Pottebaum is the guy that kind of replaces that? Not that he's going to replace Gentry's actual position, but in terms of how many fullbacks versus how many tight ends they keep, kind of that bucket, or are they going to keep only 5 wide receivers, or how do you think that looks?
I lean that Gentry does not make the roster because I think obviously you have that inline tight end with Darnell Washington. I know that's asking a lot from a rookie, but that's kind of his strong suit. I think he's a better blocker than Gentry already. You're not really eating a ton of money if you do end up cutting Gentry. And I do think Pottebaum, just from watching some tape at Iowa, he can kind of be that H-back type. I know he's had his hand in the dirt in line at times too at Iowa. So I think you can get by with him there. It's not a one-to-one replacement on the roster, like you said, but I do think that Pottebaum makes the roster and Gentry's kind of that odd man out. I know that'll kind of upset Pat Freiermuth because his buddy will be gone, but I think that's how that roster, looks. Obviously, Washington was drafted to be that inline guy, take a lot of the blocking responsibilities off of Pat Freiermuth. And I mean, do you really need Gentry and Washington on the roster at the same time? I'd rather have Pottebaum, a guy who could be that short yardage back, take some of the load off of Warren and Harris. He can be that, straight ahead, impactful fullback. We've seen that on tape at Iowa. That's where I'm looking for him to make the roster. And I think that comes at the expense of Zach Gentry.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. I think if Pottebaum is going to make it, it's going to have to be that initial Rosie Nix path of special teams. Yeah. And he's capable of doing it. He's a former linebacker. There's a background there. I don't think he'll necessarily represent himself poorly there. But Rosie Nix made it initially not as that lead blocker that became more of his role later his first year and a couple seasons beyond. But it was for blocking that punt against Carolina, for really making some consistently good plays on special teams. And for Pottebaum, just given the lack of opportunity he'll have offensively, especially with Hayward there, that's going to kind of pull some of that duty. I think that's where he's going to have to start. So yeah, I can see that on Gentry. Pottebaum would offer more special teams value if he was active and of course dressed. But I think with Gentry, he could be inactive. He's still there in case Washington were to go down. You still have another big tight end that has a similar role where your offense schematically wouldn't change that much. So interesting thought there overall. Could they keep 5 receivers? They
could, yeah.
Deontay, Pickens, Robinson, Austin, and I'll call Boykin the 5th. You do have Butler fighting for that spot, but there really is nobody locked in for that 6th wide receiver spot right now.
Yeah, you could say, Potabom makes the roster and Gunnar Olszewski is the odd man out because Calvin Austin can handle, the return duties. He's that slot option. Allen Robinson is that slot option. So that could be a path. I know that Danny Smith will probably fight tooth and nail for Gunnar just because of what he does on special teams outside of the return game. But that is another way that could go. They keep 4 tight ends and a fullback and 5 receivers.
Which is very old school, very like 1990s, but that's the way this thing's kind of getting built.
Yeah, very much so. And that leans into that bully ball mentality. So, so that's where I'm kind of watching with Potabom. He's not going to compete per se, 1-versus-1 against Gentry or Olszewski, but I think that's for me kind of those 3 players on the bubble offensively that I'm really looking forward to watching how they come into camp and hit the ground running.
And just to wrap up the point and the thought on Potabom, Eddie Faulkner had made a comment about him. There was a comment that was encouraging and one that was discouraging if you're in that Potabom camp. He said that he's a smart guy and, is picking things up pretty quickly. The downside, though, is that Faulkner made the pass at this guy's not getting a lot of reps, and that's expected just given all the talent and competition and more experienced established guys around him. So will he really have the reps? He'll play some this summer, obviously, offensively, but will you just have enough opportunity to really show yourself? To me, he may be a guy that starts that career on the practice squad, and then if there's an injury, he may get the call up. That to me, and it's early, and I haven't gotten eyes on him in Pittsburgh yet, obviously, but I think that's probably his best way to make this team his practice squad and then potentially get elevated midseason.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. I mean, obviously the reps are going to be very limited just from a running back standpoint, in camp, unless they really lean into that fullback mentality on the field and certain personnel. But he could make the practice squad and then, like you say, get elevated later in the year as the Steelers really lean into that bully ball mentality down the stretch. But I'm hoping he makes the 53 because I think he can be a good special teams player. And I think he could really help Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren in the run game, especially behind a rebuilt offensive line.
Right. Do you like the way the Pittsburgh has built this roster? Dave and I have kind of discussed and debated this some, and I think even Marcus Spears made a mention about, this team's going to have to be able to score points and shoot out some opponents. Pittsburgh's vision is very clear, as you said: bully ball, run focus, ball control, stay on schedule. That kind of mentality. Do you think that's the right strategy for Pittsburgh to take?
I think for right now it is. It reminds me a lot of kind of what the Titans have done in recent years under Mike Vrabel. Good defense, physical running game. You've got some weapons. You've got a quarterback that's not going to make a ton of mistakes, but he's not going to win you a bunch of games. That's not a knock for me on Kenny Pickett at this point. He's entering year 2. I'm not trying to compare him or say that he's going to be Ryan Tannehill for his career, but we've seen this style work at least in the regular season, and then
that's the thing.
Playoffs.
Yeah. Does it work in the playoffs? I think it works in the regular season. To the Titans' point, how far has that gotten them, though?
Yeah, I think it can work early on in the playoffs, but I don't think it's good enough to beat the likes of the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Bills at this point. Does that mean the Steelers can win a playoff game early on, wild card, divisional round? I think they could. I don't see this style getting them to the Super Bowl. It's not like the Eagles where they have a dynamic dual threat quarterback. Again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Kenny Pickett, but he is not the athlete Jalen Hurts is. So I do like how they are building this thing. I think they've finally leaned into what their identity is going to be for the next few years, just based off the way the roster is currently constructed. The Steelers their defense is going to be the key to this team. You want the offense to not turn the football over, kind of shorten games as much as possible with the run game and keep it low scoring. But outside of that, I really like how this team is built overall.
Yeah. I mean, I've made my voice heard on this before, so I'll just kind of be short and sweet. I like that there is a vision. There was not really a clear vision last year, so that's just a good foundation to have an identity and kind of know how you want to win. That's good. I agree. I think this model can and probably will put this team very much in the thick of the playoff race and probably make the playoffs and potentially win a playoff game. How far does it get you? Does it get you to Super Bowl, which is the ultimate goal? I'm less confident in. And if you're building something that does not get you to the ultimate goal, then how good is that idea in the first place? There's a whole conversation you can have and pros and cons and what are your other options. It's hard to build a team that's going to go toe for toe with the Chiefs and the Bills. You're not really equipped to do that. So you might as well go in a different direction. I get all that. But my concern, it's weird. My hope and my concern is that they become the Titans, which is a solid team, but not a Super Bowl contending team.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see this team right now is a solid team. They're going to win 10 plus games, but I don't see this group getting to a Super Bowl anytime soon, let alone winning one. And I do kind of think that this future here in the next 3 to 5 years is kind of that Titans window, 10, 11 wins, maybe a division title or two here, a playoff win or two, but they're going to come up short against those explosive, high-powered offenses.
If you had to kind of give me an X factor, an underrated name to the team's success this season, who do you think it would be? Obviously, we've talked about Dave and I know you probably agree how much, Kenny Pickett's growth and maturation depends on, and I say maturation from an on-field standpoint, not off-field standpoint, but how much that jump will determine kind of how much of a jump the Steelers make. That's obvious. Him aside, what kind of maybe underrated guy do you think really needs to have a good year for this team to get back in the postseason?
Oh man, that is a great question. I think Najee Harris has got to take that step forward and get to that top 5 to 7 running back in the league. I'm not asking him to be Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb, but he has got to be a more efficient running back. He's got to really lean into his size. I think last year down the stretch when it felt like he was fully healthy, he really leaned into that physical runner that he should be at 235, 240 pounds, rather than that guy that was dancing early on. I think he is going to be the key. If he can be the Najee Harris that the Steelers were expecting him to be when they drafted him, if he can be the guy that he was in the second half of last season, I think this offense and this team in general will take a step forward because they have very clearly built their style around the ground and pound. And he's the key to that. I mean, he's that 240-pound running back that really has to wear teams down. And he has to step up and be that guy that they thought he was going to be when they drafted him in the first round.
Do you think that's more of a Harris thing that he has to work on? Or do you think that's a product of just the O-line not supporting him well enough? And this year, hopefully the O-line will kind of give him the running lanes that he needs?
I think it's a little bit of both. I know that there were some issues last year leading up to the bye. He finally had that metal plate taken out of his shoe, I think week 5. And then from, I think it was week 6 to week 8, he was just so hit or miss. Obviously the offensive line was opening some holes, but he just wasn't seeing it. He wasn't hitting it hard enough. And then things changed in the second half. And I think now that the Steelers, at least on paper, that offensive line is rebuilt. They really like what they have, now and moving forward. I think it's on him now to really take that next step because they've put the pieces in front of him, in my opinion, and he has to be that guy that really just runs downhill, punishes defenders, and helps wear teams down so that he can have those, rip off those big runs in the fourth quarter when defenses just want to have no part in tackling him.
Mm-hmm. Just to kind of flip that question, what is your biggest concern for the 2023 Pittsburgh Steelers based on how they're currently built? One thing that could, really hinder their season.
I think it's inside linebacker. I hesitated there because I was thinking inside linebacker or cornerback, but I think it's inside linebacker. Landon Roberts is a good downhill guy. I think he fits that buck role perfectly. But Cole Holcomb hasn't stayed healthy in recent years. He's a bit of a questionable fit as a Mac. I don't really like him in coverage all that much. And again, we talked earlier with Kwiatkowski. There's not a ton of depth there. I know that they've completely remade that room, but it's still a weakness for me on this roster. And I think offenses are really going to go after them, whether it's in the passing game or trying to exploit them in the run game. So that's my biggest concern for this group overall. I know that the cornerback room is a bit inexperienced behind Peterson and Levi Wallace, but I just can't move past the inside linebacker room right now and how important historically it is with the Steelers defense, and it just does not give me a good feeling entering training camp.
What do you think the solution there is? Probably nothing that can be done now, but next off season, to me, it's always been they got to go draft a guy. They've done this free agent song and dance too many times, and they're probably going to have to do it again. So that's where I'm at.
That's where I'm at as well. I haven't taken a deep dive into the off-ball linebacker room for next year's draft at this point, but there are some names out there, and I know that there's going to be one guy that I think people are going to gravitate towards. It's Jeremiah Trotter Jr. at Clemson. The NFL bloodlines, Power 5, really productive guy, kind of that new age linebacker. I know that fans are a little scared off, thinking, oh, they got to trade up and get a linebacker. It didn't work out with Devin Bush. It hasn't worked in free agency. So I think the best bet for the Steelers is really to just take another swing in the draft. And I think that that's the best way to do this. They have to get it figured out. They can't keep doing this veteran route and hoping that these cast-offs finally hit.
Yeah, I understand. I basically agree. I mean, I get why Omar Khan, overhauled that entire up-ball linebacker room. Did it get better? Yeah. It probably got better. We'll have to see. But how much better in a meaningful way? Not really feeling it right now. All the more reason why I think Robinson should have an opportunity, but I'll get off my soapbox there. So yeah, I think inside linebacker, I think slot corner, I think just the newness defensively, there's going to be some of those growing pains I've talked and written about before, but still should be a good defense and with a good front seven. And if they can figure out how to best use Patrick Peterson and Porter make some plays in his rookie year, and maybe Trice could carve out a role, certainly there's still a lot of talent there.
Yeah, I like the cornerback room overall. Obviously, slot corner is a bit of a concern, but they've got the pieces in place at this point, in my opinion, at least in the top three with Peterson and Wallace and Joey Porter Jr. to feel at least comfortable entering the year. But outside of that, I am very concerned with slot corner overall. Yeah,
no, I'm with you there. I think it's still pretty open-ended who's going to man that role. I think it's probably going to be more than one guy at this point, and I think Pittsburgh's not quite sure how that's going to look. In terms of just, and it's a little bit ways away, but like camp battles, where do you come in on Dan Moore versus Broderick Jones? Probably the number one battle to watch in terms of how meaningful, impactful it'll be for the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are your thoughts there?
I still lean Dan Moore Jr. is going to open the year as the starter at left tackle. I'm hoping that they bring Broderick Jones along relatively slowly. I've talked about this before in articles. The gauntlet of pass rushers that this team is going to face in the first few weeks with the 49ers, the Browns, the Raiders. That's not exactly something I want to throw Broderick Jones into. I know obviously the Steelers would do their best to help give him some protection, with an extra tight end to his side, be that Darnell Washington or, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren chipping out of the backfield. I'd rather stick with the guy there with 33 career starts in Dan Moore. He knows what to expect. He knows the speed of the game. And that takes some of the pressure off of Broderick Jones. He doesn't have to come in and face arguably the best pass rusher in football and Nick Bosa to open the season. And then obviously have to follow that up with guys like Myles Garrett and, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, and even Tyree Wilson. So I think Dan Moore is going to hold him off. I do think Jones will play relatively well in preseason and have some flashes in training camp just from an athletic standpoint. But I think the wise thing to do for the Steelers is to let Dan Moore start the year at left tackle, slowly bring Jones along, and then work him into the fold where you can in the schedule where you best see fit, where it's that long runway for him rather than here you go right into the fire.
Yeah, I understand that. And I get that Jones is a pretty raw guy. So if he's not ready, then you don't start a guy that's not ready, obviously. Right. But, if he's ready, then I'm starting him, even though he's going to have to face some top guys early because, heck, you trade up for this guy. You call him, this great left tackle, the future. You don't be scared to start him if you deem him ready. Is he going to take some lumps against Bosa and Garrett? Yeah. Is he going to probably get some people criticizing him in the pick if he gives up the sack early in the season? Yeah, but if he's ready, he's ready. Don't be scared of your own shadow if the guy just because it's a tough schedule. So I'm not necessarily looking for a way to ease him in. It's hard, I think, to ease a left tackle into the NFL. It's ready or not. Let's see what you got there, Rook. But Yeah, I think certainly it'll be a great battle because Jones is raw from his college experience standpoint, and adjusting the Pat Maher system is going to, be a bit of an adjustment, obviously, for him. So I could certainly see Moore winning it. But if Moore does win it, in terms of, you said, kind of find a place to put Jones into the lineup mid-season, I wonder what that looks like. I mean, obviously, if Moore is struggling, then that's an easy way to do that. If it's not that, though, you wonder how long Jones will be sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I do think that if it is Moore to start the year, I think that leash is going to be very short. I don't know what a good spot to put Jones into the lineup is, though. I mean, maybe that week 4 road game at Houston. It's not like, Houston has Will Anderson, but, Jones has faced him before. I don't think Houston has all of those, big name pass rushers to kind of fear there. That could be a landing.
I'm not trying to start this guy when it looks easy on the schedule.
Yeah, that's fair.
Him whenever he's ready to play, regardless of the opponent.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's not the quarterback position. I get that. But then I guess the question too is, what if Dan Moore Jr. plays really well, and takes that next step? So then what? Is Jones just that swing tackle for his entire rookie season? It's going to be interesting to watch. I do think, I agree with what you and Dave have said in recent podcasts. If it's close in camp, then you go with the rookie. If it's a tie, you go with the rookie overall. But just for me, I think it's that comfort. And I say that loosely with Dan Moore, because I know obviously he had his struggles last year. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just that comfort knowing, he knows the speed of the game, he knows the expectations. That's where I'm at. And maybe that week 4 game at Houston, or maybe after the bye. But it's going to be one to watch. And I know people are going to be clamoring for Jones to get into the lineup because of what he can do as a run blocker and his production in pass protection the last 2 years at Georgia. So, but for me personally, I'm not giving up on Dan Moore, and I lean towards him in this competition this summer.
Yeah, certainly do not want to count that guy out. I thought he did progress the back half of last year. And you're right. I'm certainly not overlooking the value of that experience and the more comfort that he has in the NFL under Pat Maher. Those are things that'll be working in his advantage whenever Pittsburgh makes their decision on who their week 1 left tackle is going to be. So certainly there's value there. I'm not trying to find an easy place to put Jones into the NFL, because I don't know if that place exists. I'm just going to start him whenever he's shown that he's ready to be given that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, and even look at Kenny Pickett last year. People were like, "Oh, what's the easy spot for him to go into the lineup?" He went in at halftime, and then his first start was on the road at the Bills. So welcome to the NFL, Rook. So it's a great point. For me personally, I'm kind of worried about that gauntlet to start the year from a pass rush perspective. I mean, it's a little terrifying on paper when you look at it.
Oh, it is 100%. If Jones does start, he's going to have some rough moments against those top guys, and people should expect and prepare themselves for that. But that's the NFL. That's how, Dan Moore, he was playing against Myles Garrett pretty early in his rookie year. That first game, people say that in his rookie year, the more shut down Myles Garrett. He did not. Garrett didn't have big stats, but Najee Harris bailed out Dan Moore at the end of that game in that first matchup. And
the ball was also getting out very quickly. In Roethlisberger's final year. So
right. But you take your lumps and you get better. So that's and then heck, even assuming that Jones has some struggles when you face Bosa, you face Myles Garrett, everybody else by comparison will be a whole lot easier the rest of the season. Like you've seen the hardest that you're going to see. Of course, you're going to see Garrett again, but that's a way to make everything else probably feel a lot easier. And Pat Maher's system, generally speaking, the guards offer the tackles more help. I think under different systems, the guards kind of help the center more. You get more doubles there. Generally, if the guard's uncovered, he's going to float to the tackle and protect his inside. So, and even though there will be some chips and things that you mentioned with tight ends and running backs, I think Maher's system, the guards give the tackles more help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really, really looking forward to that position battle. It's going to be the first one that's really been this big a headliner along the offensive line, at least in my opinion, in recent years. I still like Dan Moore. I thought he got better late in the season last year, more comfortable in Pat Maher's scheme, but Roderick Jones is the future. This is the guy that this front office and this coaching staff targeted. They all believe he can be a legitimate franchise left tackle, a great player in this league. So I know he only has 19 games under his belt, but he is a very good talent overall. So I cannot wait to watch those two battle it out. And the great thing is they seem to have a great relationship so far. So, iron sharpens iron. They're going to get better together. And I think that's only going to make the Steelers offensive line and depth overall better.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm excited about the Jones pick. Happy with it overall. I do have the last concern there. If he does not start, does he even become the swing guy? Because he doesn't have a ton of experience at right tackle. He did a little bit at Georgia, but primarily their left tackle there. Mm-hmm. And how much right tackle work will he get this summer? I assume I think he'll get some, but I think obviously they're going to give him a lot of reps at left tackle. Moore is going to be the guy that's going to get some work at right tackle to let Jones kind of settle into that position he's competing for. He needs that probably more than Dan Moore does right now. So if Dan Moore is the week 1 starter, what is Broderick Jones? What is his role out of the gate?
That's a great question. Is there a world in which he's inactive?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at a little bit. Yeah,
LaRaven Clark, kind of that swing tackle. I mean, that could be a possibility. That would be a little disappointing. But, just hearing you speak about it and hypothetically, I think Moore projects better as a swing tackle. He has more experience at right tackle in college than Jones did. Obviously, he started 33 games at left tackle. He's a good run blocker. It might be better for the Steelers to just put Jones in the starting lineup and then you have Moore as that swing tackle. But
it's not going to be their calculation. If he's not
right.
If he's not the starter, then he doesn't win the job. You're right. It's easier. Like, the best case is that Jones becomes your left tackle, Moore's your swing tackle, clap your hands, you're done. I mean, that's going to be settled. If not, and obviously LaRaven Clark is, God help us if this guy's playing, but he does have that experience at both tackle spots. And I just wonder how much Jones will get work. Like if Jones is getting no work at right tackle, then you can't make that guy your swing guy unless what you would do is if, let's say, a core 4 goes down, then Moore would shift to right tackle and Jones would go to left tackle. That's a messy way to do things the team prefers not to do, but that would be a solution as opposed to making Jones inactive and playing LaRaven Clark.
Yeah, like you said, God help us if LaRaven Clark is on the field and in the lineup. But yeah, it's a great question about Jones. If he's not getting any work at right tackle, you cannot ask that rookie to go, okay, you're the 6th offensive lineman. You might have to play right tackle. You might have to play left tackle. Be prepared. You cannot do that. So there could be a world in which he is inactive early on in the year as kind of he gets up to speed. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. In an ideal world, Jones hits the field quickly. You get to see what that first round pick looks like. And your depth is a lot better with Dan Moore as that swing tackle compared to a LaRaven Clark or an inexperienced Broderick Jones. So it's going to be a fascinating position battle to watch and kind of see how Pat Meyer plugs everything in entering week 1.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I don't make those comments to knock Broderick Jones. I'm just kind of he could run the whole gamut in terms of what his role could be. It could be, I think, theoretically from inactive to your starting left tackle. So I think it's really open-ended for how this thing's going to go. And that's what partly makes it an exciting camp battle to watch. So one last question along the Pittsburgh Steelers O-line. You had written about Pat Meyer's comments about the backup center position. It's a mess there. There's really no clear front runner. We can talk about the names that are in the mix, but who do you think would be that leader if you had to pick a name right now?
Right now, it's probably going to be Nate Herbig, and I say that with some caution because he only has 49 career snaps at center in the NFL. Kendrick Green would be the logical one. 15 starts at center as a rookie. They were not good whatsoever. I think it's got to be Herbig as the front runner there, but this group, I really think this team needs to go outside and get a free agent. I've mentioned a couple of names like Matt Skura, former Ravens guy, Pat Elflein. He can play guard and center. I liked Billy Price as a cheap veteran option, but then he just signed with the New Orleans Saints. But there are some guys out there, and I think that Pittsburgh might see quickly in training camp that they've got an issue at backup center, because if it's Herbig, then you're kind of light at guard, assuming Kevin Dotson is a trade candidate at this point. But yeah, it's not a comforting position whatsoever. I mean, Pat Meyer obviously mentioned 4 to 5 guys that he thinks could be that backup. He even included 7th rounder Spencer Anderson. Yeah, theoretically he could be. He has center experience. He's played all over the offensive line at Maryland, but Mason Cole was a warrior last year, played through injury. I think he missed 45 snaps or something like that in total.
Yeah, and that mostly came in just the second half of that Bengals game.
Right. And you cannot bank on him staying fully healthy this year and fighting through an injury like he did last year. So you've got to have some depth there. I love what they've done in general in the trenches on offense, but they have neglected center behind Cole, in my opinion. And I'm hoping that they kind of see that in training camp and make a move. But if there's a clubhouse leader right now, I think it's Herbig, and that's concerning because he has less than 50 career snaps at the position.
Pat Meyer did mention that Herbig, I think, was getting some center reps and OTAs. And so there's some work there, it appears. But you're right. The NFL resume is light, and he's primarily a guard. Yeah, Mason Cole, I don't think he was ever healthy at all last year. Like, even in training camp, the dude was limping around. And so I don't think he was ever healthy the entire season. I don't know how he did it. I mean, they put every just roll of tape they could have, and just that's what they put on his ankle last year. It was kind of ridiculous, but it worked, and he played reasonably well overall. It's a battle there. External options are possible. The names you mentioned make sense. I talked about Jimmy Morrissey, the Texans. He's got a chance to get cut here. That's a name. If you made me choose an internal name, though, I'll call my shot. I'll say Spencer Anderson makes it that 7th-round rookie, that versatility. He's not had an abundance of snaps at center, but he's got a couple hundred, I think, under his belt in college. I'll say he'll be the guy.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, obviously, I did the draft profile on him after he was picked, and I thought he was better at center than he was at tackle. That's for sure. I think he's a lot better inside. Decent athlete overall. I know his RAS scorecard was lit up green and elite and all that. I didn't think that showed on tape overall, but they like him for a reason, and he fully committed to center in the pre-draft process, which I thought was very telling. So I do like you calling your shot there. I'm excited to see how he does in the NFL. It's very rare you find a college guy with that much experience at all 5 positions in the 7th round, and they did. Really curious to see how he fully adapts to center. But outside of him and Herbig, I don't know how anyone can really feel comfortable with the options there. I mean, Ryan McCollum bounced around on the practice squad on and off all last year. Kendrick Green, we have seen that at center. And I'm drawing a blank on who else he mentioned was the other name.
I think it said James Daniels, but
yes,
emergency.
And I don't know that you want to do that and create another hole at right guard to move him to center in case of injury. So I'd really like to see this team go outside the organization and get a free agent at this point, because there are still some decent, veteran names there. And I love the Jimmy Morrissey piece that you did. That makes a ton of sense, especially with the connection to Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, for sure. So any other thoughts here, Josh, on this team? Going to kind of wrap things up here in a couple of moments. Anything else on your mind about the Pittsburgh Steelers?
No, just very curious to see how this defense comes together with a lot of new faces and moving parts overall. I'm not as worried overall about the offense at this point. I mean, I don't think that they're, like we talked about earlier, I don't think they're going to be this high-flying attack that's going to outscore people. But I think we know who they are, what they want to do. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think there are quite a few unknowns defensively that I am concerned about, and really looking forward to seeing how some of these pieces fit and progress entering the season.
You're doing your annual ranking the Steelers starters, number 6 through 4. It went up today. What's been the toughest group to rank so far, the toughest name where you're trying to figure out where the best place to slot him was?
Honestly, it was Kenny Pickett. Coming into the year, I believe I had last year, Mitch Trubisky. I think I had him at, I had him at number 17. And I think I had Pickett this year at 13, but I think Pickett is going to be higher on that list next summer. It was just so hard for me to slot him in because, I liked how he played in the second half of the year, but I couldn't put him above some of the names that are in the top 10 entering this season, because there still are some concerns with Pickett. But that was the hardest one for me. And I think the other hard one for me was Levi Wallace. I had him relatively low in the rankings.
Behind Porter? I'm just curious about the thought process they were given the Porter hasn't taken a snap.
Yeah, that's always tough for me. Like last year, I'm looking at last year's list. I had George Pickens at 20, and he was ahead of Dan Moore and Mason Cole. And that was before he even played a snap. I think obviously we all liked Pickens. I think Porter should have been a first rounder. I do like him. I think obviously the hands are a concern. With Wallace, I think it was more just, it was a crunch in the 24 guys ranked this summer. You know, I think he's a good player. He doesn't move the needle a ton. I know he had a career high in interceptions last year, but I think he's just that steady vet that, you know, quietly goes about his job. I'm trying to compare him to a guy in the past, and I'm struggling to from the Steelers.
Like defense. A kind of a B-Mac kind of vibe, Brian McLaren-ish.
Yeah, you know, not a guy that's going to move the needle a ton, but he's
number
just,
two.
He's just steady. And I think Porter's kind of got a higher projection for me, at least as a rookie, compared to Wallace. So those were the two that I really had a difficult time ranking. And I know I got a lot of pushback on Wallace and a lot of pushback on Pickett. I think one of the comments with Pickett was, boy, if our quarterback's 13th in this list, we're in for a 6-11 season. And it's like, I had your starting quarterback at 17 last year and they went 9-8. So, I mean, this team isn't built to win because of the quarterback like they were with Roethlisberger. So I had a tough time with that. Man, just looking back at last year's list, Chase Claypool at 10. Maybe that's where Ryan Pace saw it. It was like, got to get that guy.
Yeah, that's where it was. Thank you, Josh, for facilitating that.
Yeah, I mean, just really rough. Akello Witherspoon and Miles Jack at 11 and 12 last year. Not great. Not a great list from last year. Nope. So hopefully this year turns out a bit better. But yeah, Pickett and Wallace were the two ones that I really struggled to rank. Yeah,
I can see you on Porter over Wallace, just given the projection, the scheme fit there. And obviously, I think, you know, Porter, you know, a great pick overall, especially for where they got him. Over Roberts and Robinson, though. I mean, I like Allen Robinson, but I think that ceiling is going to be limited. And Landon Roberts, maybe I'm too low on the guy. I mean, I do think he'll do his job well as a 2-down thumper. I just don't know what ceiling there is above that. And, you know, I just wonder, I think he's a one and done kind of guy, even though he signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I am personally, and I say this all the time, I'm slightly biased towards Landon Roberts. I've really liked that guy since Houston. Kind of always just followed him around the league. I do think he's going to be a little bit better than people expect in Pittsburgh. I'm not asking him to be a 3-down linebacker. I think he can be an early version of a Vince Williams, be that physical presence, kind of bring that fire to the defense. But yeah, he's probably a one and done. And, you know, it was a bit surprising when I first put this list together that I had him above Wallace. Yeah, I really like that guy. I really like the way he plays and what he brings to a defense.
Yeah. So your top three left are basically the top three every year. It feels like Watt, Minka, and Hayward, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Any idea? You don't have to, don't spoil anything, but do you know the order yet, or yes. How difficult is that to decide who's going to be 1 through 3?
I have the order, and I will just say this. There is a major shakeup in the top 3.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and it's through nobody's fault of their own. You know, I think just those 3 are very special, and changing it up because I think that there is a guy that's very clearly, you know, the best player on this defense moving forward. And I think that says more about him than the guys that he has surpassed.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that. Do you know when that's going to drop on the site?
That will drop Saturday. So, yeah, I know that we've got a bit of a dead period here. So looking to kind of spice some things up over the weekend. And hopefully that hits on Saturday morning and people can push back on the rankings in general. And hopefully it creates a discussion on who the new number 1 is.
A new number 1.
The new number 1.
A hint there. All right, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Probably be the only, this will be the second 2 of 2 podcasts to come out this week. I don't know the exact schedule going forward. Dave will be back for the start of the new week. So we'll probably do a show either Monday or Tuesday. We may get into our kind of Tuesday, Thursday schedule for the next couple of weeks until we go back to 3 in our training camp episodes in just over a month from now. But Josh, thank you so much. Appreciate you filling in.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right. I have written out our outro here because I'm always the worst at these. So I'm literally just going to read off the outro here and then we'll close out the show. Be sure to follow Josh on Twitter by Josh Carney. Be sure to follow me on Twitter @Alex_Kozora. Be sure to follow Dave on Twitter @Steelers Depot and follow the show @The Terrible Podcast. If you have a question, be sure to email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening and we'll talk to you soon.